Hello and welcome back, everyone. Great to be with you. How blessed are we to get to join for another connection to the Zohar. As I think about this all the time, that this concept that really, when we desire to do something that's good for our soul, when we desire to do something positive, it's really the desire of our soul that's being awakened and that's overcoming any uh, desire of the body consciousness. So if you're here today, there are many other places you could be and could have been, but you are here, which means that's a win. That's a win for the soul. So thank you for being here with us. And my desire every day that we connect is that it's more than just a study. We are plugging into the tree of life reality. This time that we spend together, this energy that we connect to fuels the changes that we can make and we need to make in our lives for the day. And as we always mention, the point of all the study, the point of our spiritual work is to remove the control of the limited nature within us, which represents our opponent, our ego, and that nature that exists in the world. Our selfishness is what creates more selfishness in the world and which therefore creates more darkness in the world. And every time we study the Zohar, that helps us overcome that. And instead of more hatred and selfishness in the world, we are creating and revealing more love, compassion, kindness in the world. So just by this time together, we're awakening more love. So let's meditate that we awaken more love within ourselves and the world to overcome all aspects of our own limited self, and do what we can to create lasting change. So with deep appreciation, we're going to begin the Zohar, the study of the Zohar. We begin with the prayer of the Ari to open up our hearts, and we thank the Creator for the great merit that we have, for choosing us, and for living in such a blessed time that we have access to this great light and wisdom, and we get to share it. ריבון העולמים ואדוני האדונים, אב הרחמים והסליחות, מונים אנחנו לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו. בגידה ובהשתחוויה שקרבתנו לטובתך ולעבודתך עבודת הקודש ונתת לנו חלק בסודות תורתך הקדושה ואנו בחיים אשר עשית עמנו חסד גדול כזה. על כן אנחנו מפנים תחת לפניך שתמיכו ותסלח לכל חטאתנו ועוונותינו ואל יהיו עוונותינו מבדילים בינינו לבניך וכן יהי רצון בפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו שתכונן את לבבינו ליראתך ולאהבתך. We're asking the Creator, prepare our hearts. It's like we're asking the Creator to come within us, to go within our heart and remove any coverings that block us, remove um, any shells that keep us limited. We don't change. The Creator comes within us and changes us. The Creator opens up our heart. ותציל עלינו עומק כל נשמתנו וכל בחינתנו ושהית ניצוצות בדרך הקדושים אשר איידם גילית את דבריך לעולם וזכותם וזכות אבותם וזכות אותם ותמשכותם יעמוד לנו נקשר בדברים אלו ובזכותם תרננו מה שאנו לומדים כמאמר אם זה מארות ישראל גל עיני והביט הנפלא מתורתך כי אדוני ייתן חוכמה מפיו דעת ותבונה יהיו לרצונים מפיו והגיוני בלפניך אדוני שבגואלי. Think about one specific thing you want the Creator to come and help you change with the merit of this study. If it's your stubbornness, if it's your laziness, if it's your sadness, if it's your anger, if it's your judgment, if it's your jealousy, you want to ask the Creator to come and help you heal that, to reveal the light that's behind that. So we're going to finish chapter 2 right now. No, we're going to finish chapter 1. Excuse me. We're going to finish chapter 1 with the last paragraph, paragraph 20. So the Zohar continues and says, because we've been saying yesterday, we spoke about how when the light of the tzaddik is there, then there is protection. And now the Zohar explains Jacob living in the land of Canaan in the way that it's phrased. Tachazeh, come and see. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz b'gorei aviv. That Jacob settled in the land that his father lived. We said yesterday, why does it say the land his father the land of his father is sojourning, when it could say Jacob lived in the land of Canaan? right? Land of Canaan is Canaan is what we call modern day Israel. So why does it say both? My Mikurei Aviv. What does it mean that it says that he lived in the land where his father lived? Kavaratama, Mago Misaviv. The phrase Megure means Megur comes from Lagur, which means to live, uh, but it also comes from the word Magor, which in the book of um, Isaiah, a few other places, but in the book of Isaiah, excuse me, Jeremiah, my bad. In the book of Jeremiah, it says, Al tetzu asadeh vaderech al telechu. Don't go out to the country, don't walk on the roads. Ki cherev leoyev mago misaviv. Because the sword of the enemy is there. Terror. Mago means terror on every side, terror all around. So while the word can mean where Isaac lived, meaning his father lived, it also can mean Isaac's terror, Isaac's fear. Why? Every day Jacob lived in in fear. We know that Jacob went through a very difficult life, and he lived in these challenges. Now we also know that when, for example, when it speaks about Abraham, it says when Jacob is creating the oath, the covenant with his father-in-law, Lavan, with his uncle Lavan, he says, uh, Elokei Avraham ufachad Yitzchak, the God of Abraham, representing the light of mercy, ufachad, and the fear of Isaac. So Isaac's connection to the Creator was one known as fear. Fear, not in a sense that I'm so afraid of this all-powerful, ruthless God who is going to judge me, but fear represents this state of awe, of respect, of reverence, of appreciation for the Creator's great light. But it represents the left column. Isaac's connection to the Creator was a left column connection to the Creator, which is still part of the spiritual system, right? Like that's why in the Amidah, when we say the Amidah in the beginning of the Amidah, it says Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, that we're connecting to the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. If if they all worship the same God, if they all connected to the same force, why wouldn't it just say the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? It sounds like there is one God of Abraham, there's one God of Isaac, and there's one God of Jacob. And the Kabbalists teach that to some degree there is. Every person has their own God, which means the way that you interact with the Creator, your experience of the Creator is going to be different than anyone else's. And that's how it's supposed to be. Isaac's connection to the Creator was through the left column, for example. That the Creator for him was one thing. For Abraham, it was something else. For Jacob, it's something else. For you and I, it's something else. We establish what kind of connection we'll have with the Creator, and that depends on our own, let's say, perspective or soul. But going back to this, Vayeshev Yaakov Betzrim Aviv, when Jacob lived in the land, when it says Vayeshev Yaakov that he lived, by this paragraph is um, some parts of it are a little confusing, but don't be deterred by that. Rabbi Elazar said, what does it mean that Jacob settled in the land that his father lived, or the land of Isaac, which represents the left column? Rabbi Elazar says that Jacob settling in the land, dwelling in the land of his father, means that he attached he attached himself and he settled in that place that is attached to darkness. So Jacob was now settling into the darkness. We know that the darkness is Isaac's specialty. Isaac represents the great light of darkness. And this was Jacob embracing that. Eretz Mikurei Aviv, what does it mean? The land of his father, where his father lived. Daika be'eretz Canaan. We know that's the land of Canaan. We know that's the land of Israel. But here the Zohar is saying that when Jacob lived in the land that his father lived, the land of Canaan, it represents Jacob connecting these two levels. What does the land of Canaan represent? He attached everything in their place. Migurei Aviv, when it says that he lived in the land that his father lived, Dadina Kasha, that represents harsh judgment. Be'eretz Migurei Aviv, K'ma Ditma, when it says that he lived in the land of where his father lived, Haudina Rafia, this represents the softer judgment. The EU, we'll explain soon. The EU Eretz, which represents land. The Itachid Min Din Akasha, that is that he attaches, he holds on to the harsh judgments of Veit Yashav Yaakov, V'itachid Bei, and that's where Jacob settled, and that's what he unified everything. So here Rav Shimon has a little commentary to explain what the Zohar is talking about, and we brought this slide from last time from oops from it's very bright. We brought this slide when we explained what's called the male light and the female light. Rav Asha explains male light represents light that is drawn from above to below, which when you draw light from above to below, it's like you take endless light and you take it selfishly. Instead of using it to reveal more light, you take the Creator's endless light from above, from the spiritual realm, and it becomes invested into this physical world. It becomes surrounded by the klipot. Endless light using selfishly. That draws very harsh judgments. But when the female light represents light that's from below to above, which represents restriction, and that results in softer judgments. So here the Zohar is saying that Jacob living in the land of Canaan represents the harsh judgments, and the land of his father, which represents Isaac. Isaac is harsh judgments, represents the light coming from above to below. But Jacob living there means that he connected to the female light in the land. He combined these two levels, the male and female light, and instead of being harsh judgment, he brought it to a state of soft judgment. So Jacob sweetened the judgments, especially in the land of Canaan. We know that the land of Canaan, which eventually, hundreds of years later, when the Israelites came, when Moses led them and Joshua conquered the land, it says that they had to overcome the different nations there. The nations represent the different levels of klipot. So Jacob settling in the land was the first time where the judgments started to become transformed. This represents, maybe not the first time, but it represents Jacob going through that process of connecting to the female aspect, the female light there, which represents the softer judgments of the land. And that was what Jacob could do because Jacob was the central column, so he was able to connect to both levels. Okay, now we're going to go into chapter 2. These are the generations of Jacob. So now we're going to go more into the understanding of Jacob and Joseph, the connection, and the dynamic, but also the spiritual levels of each. Paragraph 21. Ele todot Yaakov Yosef. So if you look at the next verse, right, of verse 2 of 37, chapter 37, it says, Ele todot Yaakov, these are the generations of Jacob. Yosef ben 17 shana. Joseph was 17 years old. So it starts to tell the story of the generations of Jacob, but then it immediately goes to Joseph. We know that Jacob had another 11 kids, 10 older than Joseph, 1 younger than Joseph. But when it starts to tell the generations of Jacob, it immediately goes to Joseph. It immediately speaks about Yosef. Why? And all of a sudden tells us that he's 17 years old, and he was feeding the flock with his brothers. He was very young. He was younger than the children of the other maidservants of Milan Zilpa. And he would tell his father about the negative things that his brothers would do. So the Zohar says, why does it use in the beginning of the phrase, Ele Toldot Yaakov Yosef? Why does it say these are the generations of Jacob? Joseph. Bata Dityashev Yosef Yaakov. Once Joseph settled with Jacob, Vizdavag Shimsha B'Sihara, it represents how the sun, which represents Zeir Anpin, mated with the moon, which is Malchut. It represents the coming together of the male and female, which we know that, as the Zohar will explain, that represents connection, which results in creation. So when the male and female came together, right and left column, Kedain Shara Lemeba Toldot, then that is what allows for there to be offspring. when male and female come together, then offspring is possible. So the Zohar is saying, Uman iu de avitoldot, who is the one that brings forth offspring? Ahada v'amar Yosef. So in the verse when we're saying, these are the offspring of Jacob. Who brings offspring? Joseph. Not to say, obviously, we're not talking physically here right now, right? The Zohar is speaking about Sfirot, and we'll see. Dahu, Ahadav Yosef, that is Joseph, who is the connection that allows for offspring. Dahu Nahad because really, offspring creation comes from the river that flows and never stops, the endless flowing river. From that river that flows, Iu Avitoda, that's where offspring comes from. Begin de la paskin memoy la almi, because the river flows, the water flows endlessly, it never stops. Iu Avitodot behaaretz, and that's where Jacob had children in this land. We know all of Jacob's children were born out of this land. So what is the Zohar talking about here? We'll see soon. Umine nafkin todot lama, and that's what brings, and that's how he brought offspring to the world. So here Rav Shimon explains that when it says that when we're talking about this connection of the level of Yesod of Joseph, we're explaining how actually it is Joseph is the completion of the level of Zeir Anpin. So where do souls? We've spoken about this before, but the Zohar Rav Shimon is reminding this again. Where does everything manifest in this world from? Everything in this world manifests from our spiritual source, which is called Zeir Anpin and Nukva, the the supernal spiritual uh, couple, male and female couple, Zeir Anpin and Malchut. Their unification, their light, is what draws down blessings into our world. All the worlds leading to our world. But where do they get their light from? They cannot do it on their own. What happens is there's when Zeir Anpin and Malchut, what's called clothe the levels of Abba and Ima. So there's the lower male and female, which is called Zeir Anpin and Malchut. Then there's the upper male and female, which is called father and mother, Chochmah and Bina. When those levels come together, then light flows endlessly. Those levels always come together. The light in Chochmah and Bina, Abba and Ima, spiritual father and mother, exists always. That is what's called the endless stream, endless light. Their unification exists always. It cannot be separated. Therefore, light always flows. The question is, when do we access that endless flow? So that's what, when Zeir Anpin and Malchut, when it says that they are clothed by the light of the supernal father and mother, that's called Yesod of Gadlut. The Yesod, the level of Yesod that is in a state of Gadlut, a greatness or maturity, or in its state of ultimate greatness, let's say. So that's what Joseph represents. Joseph represents this state of Zeir Anpin in its state when it's connected to the higher levels of higher male and female levels that can draw down endless blessings and create offspring. So the coming of the male and female represent the unification between the level of Jacob, which is Tiferet, and the level of Joseph, which is Yesod. These two levels, while they are both the central column, we'll explain soon, but Yesod being the end of Zeir Anpin, right? This is the frame of Zeir Anpin. Yesod being the bottom of it, that represents the Masach, the restriction. So it's only when the restriction is on the level of Yesod that then the level of Zeir Anpin and Malchut can go up and draw everything they can from the higher levels. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Then the Zohar continues. Oh, where I skipped something. Paragraph 22. Deha Shimsha, because the sun, representing Zeir Anpin, Afal Gavdi Kara V'Zihara, even though it gets close or connects to the moon, which represents the Malchut, the Nukva, La'avid Ibin Baruhu Dagad Yikreos Tzadik. It does not create offspring or fruits until, except for the level, it only creates fruits on the level of Tzaddik, the righteous, which is called Yesod. V'Yosef Iu Dagad Yaakov L'Memad Ibin. And Joseph represents the level of Jacob, that creates fruits. Jacob is Zeir Anpin or Tiferet, and Joseph is the Yesod, which is where the fruits come from. And what brings forth children to the world. Therefore, it says, Ktiv, Ele Toldot Yaakov Yosef. That's why, again, it says these are the generations, these are the offspring of Jacob, Joseph. Joseph is what allows for Jacob, allows for Zeir Anpin to have offspring, to create. Um, so that's what I said before, that that Joseph is the bottom of Zeir Anpin, the Masach, and that's where allows for Zeir Anpin to be clothed in supernal father and mother, and bring down fruits into the world, children to the world. 23. El Toldot Yaakov Yosef. When it says that these are the generations of Jacob, Joseph, Komanda have a mistaka b'diokted Yosef. And the Zohar is saying, if you had a time machine, you can go and physically see Jacob and Joseph, or you'd speak to anyone who ever knew them, you would say they looked exactly the same. Hava amada the dahu diokted Yaakov, and you would see Joseph, you would say that looks exactly like Jacob. Now, we're not just talking physically. The Zohar is saying that it represents their spiritual level. If they looked identical, it represents how that their energy was in total affinity. Tachazeh, come and see. Divchulu b'nei Yaakov, all of Jacob's other children, laktiv el todot Yaakov Reuven. It doesn't say these are the children, these are the generations of Jacob. Reuben. It doesn't say these are the generations of Jacob. Shimon, Simon. It only says about Bal Yosef. It only says about Joseph. Didioknei dame lidiokna da'avoy, because his image, his form is the same as his father. Now, again, we're not necessarily talking physically here. We know that Abraham and Isaac also had the same image, but we've spoken about that, why that is. But here the Zohar is saying that it represents that their levels were the same. Jacob being Tiferet, Tiferet is the central column of between Chesed and Gvura. Joseph is Yesod, which is central column of Netzach and Hod. So they both represent the level of central column. So when it says that they look the same, or they were the same, it represents that they both represent the central column of two opposite sides, of two opposite extremes. They are both that balancing force of the two opposite extremes. Then the Zohar continues, Ben Shva Esra Shana, paragraph 24, that he was 17 years old. Why do we need to know how old Joseph was? Ben Shva Esra Shana, Amar Rabbi Abba says, Ramaz leikut shemrichu deha kadit itaven minei Yosef. Ben Shva Esra Shana Hava. The Creator, it says, why do we need to know that Joseph was 17? The Creator was hinting to this process that when Joseph was lost to his father, when Jacob lost Joseph, when the brothers sold him into slavery, when, from Jacob's perspective, when his son was killed by the wild animals, Joseph was 17. And all the days after that Jacob remained without Joseph, Jacob cried over those first 17 years. And the same amount of time of Joseph's life that Jacob cried over, the Creator gave him another 17 years to live in the land of Egypt. So I'll just explain before we continue. We know that Jacob lived 147 years. First 130 years are the first part of his life when he meets Pharaoh. We'll see this in the portion of I think Vayigash. When Pharaoh meets Jacob, Pharaoh says, "You're old. How old are you?" And he says, "I'm 130, and I've lived very bitter days." So the first 130 years of Jacob's life were years of great darkness and challenges, and we said those 130 years represent the correction of the 130 years of Adam. But then it said he lived another 17 years, and he lived those final 17 years in the land of Egypt. We're going to go through kind of all the timelines and everything, but right now here the Zohar is just mentioning it. So in those 17 years that Jacob lived in the land of Egypt, he lived in happiness, in honor. He was the father of Joseph, who was there at the king. Bishlimu dechol, and he was whole and complete in every way, physically and spiritually. Bei Yosef have Malka, his son Joseph was king. The Chobanoi Kamehava, and all of his sons were with him. We know that after Joseph left, everyone kind of went in their own place. Reuben kind of went in his own way. Judah went in his own way. He had his own falling experiences. All the brothers were scattered. When they all came to Egypt, they were all together again. Inu Shvas Shanin Havachai Gabe, and he lived these 17 years. Those were the years that were considered real life for him. And that's why it says that Joseph was 17, Kadiit Avin Mine, that he was 17 when he was lost from his father. So what the Zohar says sounds like it's saying, it sounds very literal, but Rav Shimon is going to reveal the deeper meaning of all this. So just to understand, the Zohar asks, why do we need to know how old Joseph was? That he was 17. Why does that matter to us? So the first understanding, based on the literal understanding of the Zohar, is that we have to understand the Creator was hinting to the fact that the 17 years that Jacob mourned more than 17 years, but the time that Jacob mourned, he was mourning over the 17 years that his son had lived. So the Creator gave him another 17 years. The years that he cried over, the Creator gave him the years of blessings and honor and happiness that he lived later on. But here Rav Ashlag explains something much deeper. He explains that the level of Joseph, the level of Yesod, is called 17. Why is it called 17? Because it represents what's called Lechem Mishneh. It represents the state of wholeness and perfection. And whenever we talk about wholeness and perfection, we go back to this concept of the balance between the light of mercy and light of wisdom. Without the light of mercy and light of wisdom being balanced, there is no wholeness, there is no perfection. So when it says that, yeah. So what is the light of mercy? How does the balance between light of mercy and light of wisdom, meaning the perfected level of Yesod, how is that 17? The light of wisdom represents the seven sfirot. The light of wisdom has seven sfirot because they only shine from what's called below to above. It's the female light. That's because we know the light of wisdom comes from the Malchut. And so that's just 7 levels. It's missing what's called the upper 3. So it just has 7 levels. The light of mercy is the light that comes from above to below. Realize the previous one, they should have illuminated from the bottom up. But here, the light of mercy, light of chasadim, is the light that goes from above to below, and therefore it has all 10 levels. It includes the upper 3 sfirot. So that's what when you say that the Yesod represents this state of perfect balance between light of mercy and light of wisdom. That's a state of perfection. So when it says that Joseph was 17, and that why did Jacob mourn over losing Joseph? Because Joseph was not just the son that he loved. It wasn't just a part of him. It represents this state of perfection. It represents the balance of these two energies. Joseph was the perfection of Jacob. Because when Jacob had Joseph, it represented that finally there was this perfect balance between light of mercy and light of wisdom. And when Joseph was lost, when Jacob lost Joseph, it means that now these light of mercy and light of wisdom are no longer balanced. And that's why it says that Jacob lost his life. Because when he lost his connection to light of wisdom, light of chokhmah represents chaya. Chaya means life. And that's why there's the phrase that the Kabbalists use all the time, the verse that says, "Chokhmah techaya ba'alea," that wisdom is what gives life to a person. So when Jacob lost Joseph, it's not that he was sad that he lost his son, he also probably was. But his life was robbed of him because he was now no longer in that state of perfection between these two levels. And that's why when Joseph came back to him, his life came back to him, because now finally Jacob was in that state of perfection that he had that light of chokhmah, that light of wisdom back. So that's what happened when Joseph was born. Jacob came to the state of perfection between light of wisdom and light of mercy, and he spent those 17 years in that state. When Joseph was lost, Jacob lost that connection, And that's why he was in the state of depression. He's lost his connection to the Creator because he lost his life force. He lost this balance of light of wisdom and light of mercy. And all the years that he mourned over him, the Creator gave him those years back in the last 17 years of his life, where he was with Joseph and everything was whole and complete again. Um, Tomorrow we're going to continue with chapter 3, and the Zohar is going to explain about the struggle between body and soul and the reason why we experience challenges. So we'll continue with that tomorrow. Lots of love to everyone. Thank you for joining once again, and looking forward to seeing you tomorrow.